young men speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while, when will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
Hello, hello. It is another week and more excitement. Another week of utter chaos on the internet, as always, because we're living in the world of pure chaos. And we've done this little 3-part series, and I guess actually it's going to be a 4-part series because this is the follow on to my last 3 live streams. And I think it dovetails rather nicely. So we've got our Sampel ready to go. We've got our Muppet cup also full of Sampel. Have you considered? You should consider. I've got my pirate skull mug here. Got some lovely Westminster tea from the Table Rock Tea Company. And then I've got my turmeric tea right in my captain's mug. So we are ready to rock and roll. Let's grab our favorite tome, Better Procrustes, Nassim Taleb. Turn to a random page. Oh, ethics. If you find any reason why you and someone are friends, you are not friends. I agree. Tyranny of propositions must have you in that case. You just kind of know your friends. Which gets sort of to the point that I shall be discussing this evening, which is identity. The absurdity of it all and its opposite, indeed. So where does this term come from? What does this term mean? Well, it's really recent, guys. It's, 1600s. But it is from the French from 14th century. And of course from Latin, because every good thing comes from Latin. Sameness, ultimately from Latin idem, neuter, the same. See, idem, sameness, yeah. And an earlier word in English was idemtite, sorry, from the 1560s, which is also from the Latin idemtitus. The term identity crisis is recorded by 1954. Meaning crisis, anyone? Identity theft is attested from 1995. Identity politics, 1985. So now we see where this warped, very warped and unhelpful idea of identity comes from in, we'll call it, recent thought. But how did we get to this point where we even need to discuss identity? I would like to tell you a tale. Back before the great evil of science. We lived in an enchanted world. Then we were given a knife and told how to use it and told that we should use it. And since then, we have dissected everything. Having cut ourselves out of the world, we can no longer find a place within it. We aren't connected. We thought this would reveal our uniqueness, what makes us us and not someone else. It failed. It turns out you can't just cut away the quote bad parts or the parts you don't like to get to the essence of things. There are several key errors at play here. First, you are identified in relation to something else, not apart from other things. So giving people a knife and telling them they could cut is an error. Making cutting off, which, basically is one of the definitions of ontology, right? Categorizing, bringing things down to their objects. That's that, 4 weeks ago now, live stream on objective worldview. But making that a value, like, oh, it's good to do this, that was an error. The concept that you could know something by separating it from what it is not is an identification against. That's another error. Well, I'm not that, so I'll cut that off, and then what's left will be me. That's an error. That's just a mistake. This is all based on horrific mistakes. What tools did we give up or destroy to get this science, which, to be fair, does classify things? That is the proper role of science. Well, we did away with relations as such. That's what dissection does. And this causes the intimacy crisis, right? The loss of quality relationship in the world. And we have replaced relations with properties. Thanks, science, which quite honestly just aren't up to the task. You can't recreate relationships, much less qualities, much less quality of relationships using properties. Can't be done. And this is all done, to be a little bit fair, to gain certainty about what and who we are. Certainty about a thing comes from the scientific definition of ontology, which is this classification of objects. And sure, if you want certainty, science is the way to go. Now, there's several problems with certainty. Once people have certainty, they don't want things to change, because if change exists, then certainty degrades. It's a big problem, actually. It's way bigger than you think. You want to know where the compression of time comes from, why they ignore time and change, that's it. If you're striving for certainty, you don't want change. You can't have both. You got to pick one. Do you want to be certain about something, or do you want to be in a changeable world? That's a big problem. Excuse me. Now, that is just part of how we got here to this confusion about identity. In terms of issue with the framework of allowance and the barrier to entry to new concepts, perhaps. But I'll just leave them at this. The framework allows you to do things using tools, techniques, and with systems. And the barrier to entry is gatekeeping, by the way, which we keep trying to do away with, which is who is allowed to use those frameworks. And that's part of how we got here too. All of that. You're giving people the tools of science, telling them that cutting things away and ontologizing them, as in categorizing objects, is a valuable thing. And you're telling them that here are the tools and you too can do this. And that's a lie. It's just false. Completely wrong. I don't know what else to say about it. Just completely wrong. But where are we exactly? Identity isn't only some personal engagement or way that you can understand how you relate to the world. It's also how we know the world. And by knowledge, I mean participation, because that's always what I mean by knowledge. In other words, it is the information we need to participate with the world. Storytelling itself doesn't work without a good sense of identity and how identity changes. In other words, identity can't change randomly. It can't change arbitrarily. It can't be relativistic. All of these are part of the struggle with identity. But the fact is, you can't tell stories if identity is any of those things, much less all of them. It's not relative. It's not arbitrary. It has constraints. That's how it works. We need constraints to identify things. And the thing is, when we don't have a proper relationship to identity, we cannot have a proper relationship to the world. In other words, we can't be in the world. It's domiciled. If we try to figure it all out ourselves, even about other people, like what is the identity of that other person, we immediately run into trouble. The limitation of our information we have and the information we have access to, two things, right? The limitation of our perspective, the limitation of our cognitive capacity, the limitation of our experience in the world, and in fact, our knowledge of the world. All knowledge comes from experience, but not all experience conveys knowledge. And of course, the limitation of interpretation all arise and make it impossible for a single person to adjudicate identity, yours or anyone else's. Impossible. You can't adjudicate it. You might get it right by accident, or you might get it right on purpose in certain instances, but that doesn't scale to like 3. So what are we talking about here? And from all of this arises a larger problem. There should only be a limited number of identities that are useful in the world. And this better be true, because we can only track a limited number of identities for other people, and we can only embody a limited number of identities for ourselves. If we do not live in a pre-created order, we are screwed. But since we live at all, we must. It's really not that hard. This is the problem with when did life arise? How did life arise? Are we the only life? Statistically, blah. Same problem. No, there's a pre-created order, guys. I don't know what to tell you. It's not that hard. And the more we have in terms of identities, the more we try to create new identities, the more spread out or flooded we become. The less we can unify on anything, because everybody is trying to Frankenstein their own identity, whether it be for themselves or for somebody else. And that just spreads us out further and further and further. And this matters not just for sense making. Oh, the sense making crisis and the identity crisis are the same. Yeah, actually, they are. They are identical. But for how we identify ourselves. Now, why is it important to have an identification for ourselves? Because some people sort of try to avoid it, right? And you can always take the attitude that, well, other people need to know how to interact with you. And that is true, and that is important, and that is part of it. But there's something a bit more important going on. And this is one of those places where I have to say, this is why people like Gerard. Not that you should like Gerard, but he's got some interesting points. So let's talk about exemplification. We all need to exemplify something. We need to mimic. We need to have something to mimic. That is an exemplar. If we are told that we are on a hero's journey, utter garbage from Joseph Campbell, then we try to do that. After all, heroes are unique by definition. They stand out. They have magical powers. They are able to bring about things in the world at a scale which perhaps no one else can. So even things like comic books break this paradigm in a very important way. And that's harder to see. And that could be the topic of another live stream later. If you want to see that one, comment below. Maybe I'll do it. Who knows? And then what are we exemplifying? Especially if we don't want to have one strongest man. We don't want to have one goddess of war. What are we doing? What if more than one god can hurl lightning? Which one do we exemplify now? We have to have something to copy, to mimic. Otherwise, we're just lost. And maybe not all of us, but almost certainly you. People who aren't lost by that know everyone else is, by the way. So isn't that hard for me to make that statement with 100% confidence? Because it's obviously true. And these factors that I've mentioned thus far all come together to form our desire to be heroic, unique, to operate at a high level, the level of society or the level of government, right? And talk about that and look at that and try to do something significant. It's not significant if you help the homeless person that no one else will help because no one else is paying attention to that homeless person. So that's not significant. No one else is even going to see it. How are they going to identify me as the good person? No, I want to be the guy who fixes the national debt. What? Have you ever even worked for the government? No, I thought not. I wonder how I knew. Very mysterious. This is what we want. We want that grand engagement to change something big, to be the hero, because the hero fixes problems for lots of people all at once. The hero does the impossible things, the big things that make a difference to whole towns, whole city states, whole nations. And constantly trying to identify with this hero on this journey, or to go on this journey to become this hero, which I don't know where Joseph Campbell got any of that from. None of that is in any literature anywhere, just to let you know. It's not in any literature. So I have no idea where he got this idea from. None. Zero. Because it's not anywhere. It's a complete fantasy on his part. The psychological framing, which Campbell was very much caught up in, is individualistic. And that makes identity a project of separating things out from your personal private perspective out to the world. So you're stuck in your personal private perspective, kind of by definition. It's not a magic trick. That's what it refers to. In order to identify the individual that is you, you have to cut away a bunch of things. The result of that, by the way, is that you try to live in the objective material reality because you have to cut everything away in order to identify. And in fact, you take a bunch of things with you and you cut them out and go, well, that's an object too. It belongs in objective material reality. But the worst side effect is the self-realization. The act of making yourself real is an emergence is good frame of bringing out the hidden, forbidden knowledge, anyone, self to the outside world. Probably triumphantly as the hero of some journey or story or whatever nonsense Joseph Campbell and his ilk poisoned us with. So the outside doesn't go away. It's just it from the personal private perspective. Middle out thinking, anyone? Of course, I've got a video on that. You have no other choice. You must identify things by you yourself, the author. Postmodernism? Anyone? Cutting away everything that isn't the essence of the thing. Of course, you haven't yet identified the thing. You're still just cutting, which means you're cutting blindly. And the reason why that happens is because you're trapped with the tools you have. Those are the only tools you have for every person. Those are the only tools they have to do this work. And they think they should do it, and they think they can do it, and they think they have to do it, and they think those are the only tools there are. Those aren't the only tools they are. They can't do it by themselves, and they shouldn't be trying. So, of course, this causes domicide. You don't have a home. When you're busy cutting yourself down to your essence to identify yourself or make yourself your true identity and make that known to the world, you are no longer in or of the world. You are apart from the world. Objective material reality, anyone? In that way, the search for identity is a trick of individualism and materialism and objectivism. See the 3 previous live streams for more information if that is confusing. This quest for identity either becomes a fantasy of superheroism or it becomes a fight against the outside for your own self-image. No, I want to be able to dictate to you which pronouns you use when you are referring to me, even when I'm not there. No, I'm a gender ambiguous deer or cat or whatever. Superhero. A super being. It's one or the other, right? You're still stuck in a binary frame. You transcend by being raised into some godhood or by battling those telling you who you are and what you should do. There's no other way to transcend. That's it. Those are your 2 options. And this ignores the world either way. And you're stuck in the binary. And you're doomed to the nihilism which domicide both offers and leads to inevitably. The issue is then between having unrealistic expectations about who you are, what you can do, what's possible in the world, and being constantly at war with everyone around you, telling you what pronouns to use, uh, dressing in a strange way just to be sort of standing out and forcing people to like deal with you in the moment, all in fights over identity, which you could have easily if you just stopped opponent processing and started cooperative processing. And that is right. You are doing disappointment or conflict as the result of nothing more or less than your own free will. You're trying to assert your own personal, private perspective, free will on the world, either by being bigger than a single person or by fighting every other person for attention. How is that freedom working out for you? When you are free, you're free to pick your own identity. In fact, you kind of have to be free. This is the trap of freedom, undefined freedom. Freedom what? Freedom to do, freedom to, freedom from, freedom of. What is this freedom? And now you're in a constant conflict to be free, but to have anything at all outside of your own personal private perspective. And I do mean actually outside of your own personal private perspective, you need to cooperate with other people. But who is it doing the cooperating? What is it that you can cooperate on? How does negotiation work with freedom? It doesn't. Identity is a function of relation. You are a son or a daughter, and you can have a son or a daughter and be to them what you are to your parents. Same object, same material, same person, different identification. You can have a best friend, you can have a casual acquaintance, you can have some friends that you know, you can have somebody that you're, say, more than friends with, a spouse or a significant other. Those are all different identities. And you have to manage them all, and you're not free to pick them at will. What people see in the world is action, function, affordance. If they see you as combative, you are conflicted over identity. Perhaps in all cases, by the way. If they see you as aloof, arrogant, or narcissistic, you are fighting for your own identity by removing yourself from the world and attempting to put yourself outside of and typically above other people. Although some people will settle for below. You ever see those tattooed freaks with their piercings? They don't want to be above you. They're happy to be below you, but they don't want to be at the same level as you. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to have the power of control by steering people, by influencing people to do things. They want to have the power of control by keeping people away or enticing them down into their little world. In either event, you are incapable of negotiation, connection, relationship. The world cannot give you an affordance that you will not accept using your free will. You cannot improve an affordance or an identity if you don't compromise. What are you compromising? Let's just assume that free will is the most valuable thing that you have, although I don't think I agree with that statement. Well, the most valuable thing you have to bargain with is your free will. And the more of it you give up, the more you can get in return. Either way, this works out in favor of what I'm laying down here. Therefore, to have an identity is to have relationship, and to discern identity requires careful discernment of context and perspective. Those are different things. You can have different perspectives in the same context. Then you can negotiate identity. You aren't just what you do for work, and you aren't just what you do in your spare time, and you aren't just who your parents think you are. You aren't just who your friends think you are. You aren't just the hero that your child thinks you are, or the monster that any number of people might perceive you as. So, identity as such, requires a relationship to exist, to be noticed, and to flourish. If you want to upgrade your identity or change your identity, you need to change the relationship. First, we must discern, then we must identify, and then negotiate the value. Then we can decide if we must or should relate. And then how we do that. Quality of relationship, anyone? Vitally important to understand this level of complexity when talking about identity. There's an identity over here. There's an identity here in you. There's a relationship between those identities, unless you don't want there to be. Excuse me. Maybe you don't want a relationship with Satan. Probably a good move. It's very complicated to do all of the discernment, identification, and the negotiation of the value. It's not straightforward. It's not an easy answer. I'm not here to give you easy answers. If you're here for easy answers, you're in the wrong place. That is for certain. And what is a poor individual supposed to do about identity? Does it even matter whether or not they have an identity? Can't they just change it at will? Is it actually important to have a fixed set of identities, or can we just live in the relativistic world? Is that what they're protecting? That's what they're protecting. That's why they want this fluidity. They're protecting the relativistic world. And, with that restriction lifted, we could be just fine, right? We could just fine without an identity or without a fixed identity. These are the questions should be asking, but really no one's talking about at all except me here. So the question then becomes, what should you do about identity? And the answer is relatively straightforward. Integrate. Things outside of you can do things that you cannot. Distributed cognition is real and can help. Cooperation beats opposition every time. All the people fighting. Oh, we want decentralization. Oh no, the banks came in and took away our Bitcoin. Yeah, well, a group of people is always going to beat one person. And you're all just single persons. You're specifically decentralized. So you can't have it both ways. If you want something better, you have to build it with others. Community matters more than money. If you want to know more about community, you can buy my book. I'm just saying. Discern archetypes. Good archetypes from bad archetypes, because there's both kinds of archetypes. Discern patterns. Good patterns and bad patterns. There's both types. Acknowledge that you are always identifying with something. And therefore, you need to know what that is. You are always following patterns. Be sure you know what they are. Pay attention to the fruit, not the words. We cooperate in the material, in the physical world. That is where all of this happens. That is the thing that happens as the result of the cooperation or the lack thereof. It's very important. You are going to mimic something. It should be an ideal, and it should be of the ideal form of that ideal. I know self-reference is a problem. Also, we run out of words at some layer. I think that was it. Don't smash two ideals together. Can't fly and have laser eyes. No, pick one. The patterns that we're stuck in, we can't see. We're stuck in them. Some of the things that we're mimicking, we can't see. We're just mimicking them without even realizing it. It's unconscious or subconscious. We need other people's feedback, which is imperfect. To be sure, people suck. You suck too, by the way. So they suck to you, you suck to them. You'll all live, I think. It'll be fine. It was always true anyway. We seem to have made it pretty far. So that's pretty hopeful. You need their help, and they need yours. And you could say honesty is important. Diplomacy is also important. And if you can combine honesty and diplomacy, you can resolve identity and improve your identity. And it's all trade-offs. I mean, you're not going to be able to identify as all the Greek gods at once or all the Greek heroes at once. Like, that's not going to happen. If that's your plan, you need a new plan. Bad plan. You need to understand what it is that you are doing in the world, because you don't now, because you can't see yourself in relation to other things the same way someone outside you can. Most people can't see where they're standing. But you need to integrate with the world instead of trying to differentiate yourself from the world. Identity is handed down to you from above. Other people can look at you and help you to work out your identity. Maybe they give you a nickname that you don't like. Maybe it tells you something very important about the way you operate in the world. And if you know that, even if you consider it a limitation, at least you know you have a limitation and you can adjust. And maybe they'll get it wrong or partly wrong or whatever, but it's better than the zero information that you think is not zero information that you have in your head. That's for sure. And you got to start somewhere. And once you drop the opposition, the rebellion, the identification against, and once you stop trying to control what people are going to call you and how they're going to identify you, then you can find a true home in the world. And that's what people need. They need a home, a place, a space in the world, some place that they can be useful in, interact in, some place that tells them, you know what? You don't have to worry about these 5 million things. Just focus on these 4 things. You don't even know what 4 things you should focus on without negotiation, without community, without having an identity in that community. I don't know how and when and where everyone who's going to watch this grew up. But the world that I grew up in, every town had that worthless drunk that was tolerated in the town. He had a place. It was a horrible place. He led a horrible life. But if he had been drunk in a town where no one knew him, his life would have been worse. And since the drunkenness didn't seem to be optional for that particular person, he was in the best place he could be in at the time. Every town had one of those. They could have swapped them around, I guess, but it would have been worse for everybody. The drunk knew he was a drunk. People knew he was a drunk and would hire him, even though they knew the work wouldn't get done right in most cases. That's a real phenomena. It's not ideal, but it's better than the alternative. Onward to the comments. It's not. If you don't want change, you also can't deal with children. Yes, well, you would think that would have more of an impact. And yet when I tell it to people, blankness. It's not. The most important thing to exemplify is being better. Yes, that is true. The most important thing is to be better. That's it. That's all you have to do. Exemplify being better. Other people will see you trying to be better or being better, and they will do it, and on and on and on. I agree. Excellent. Excellent advice. Identity is a constraint. So if you want freedom from constraint, you're going to have a really, really big problems. Yes. What freedom from constraint and consequences seems to be what most people are referring to when they see the word freedom, you're going to have big problems. Right. Right. The only true you know yourself in relation to your maker. Well, perhaps, Anselman, perhaps. It may be in relation to a lot of other things too, but uh, if you tried to relate directly to your maker, your face would burn off, at least according to that silly book. So I don't recommend that strategy. Music Dude 246. How's it going, RJ? Does make identify as a pirate. What? Do you mean Mark? I do. What do we got? Ixnot. Mark is definitely a pirate. I'm going to steal that quote from you and never give you credit. Yes, I am confirmed a pirate. I steal lots of things. And then I just reframe them. Don't tell anybody. I don't think anyone's noticed. I'm just reframing a bunch of other people's work. Don't tell them. Ixnot. Can't fly and have laser eyes? Does that mean I should idealize Airwolf? Everybody should idealize Airwolf. Obviously, Airwolf is the penultimate TV show that could exist. And Airwolf is goodness itself. I know that because it is my favorite show. Why it works with all those plot holes, I like why it works for me, the guy who notices plot holes better than everyone else. All right. I am wiped out. I really liked that monologue. I spent a lot of time on it. It was very long. If you would like to join in and ask me questions about identity in particular, but other things as well, there is the link for you to do so. Let me see if I can pin the link on my YouTube channel. I'll look at that. I remember to pin the link. It's a small miracle. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the big topic. I don't like the way anybody else is talking about it. So I did my own stream on it. And it flows from the past 3 weeks quite nicely. I think it really dovetails nicely with the things we were talking about in the previous 3 weeks. So it's also a nice way to round out the month here. So I thought that was just kind of worked out that way. I didn't really plan it. And of course, it's really all Ixnan's fault anyway. So we have to thank him for the wonderful 4 live streams that we got out of that interaction. And look, I mean, if there's other topics people want me to cover, they can certainly post them and I'll do my best. I know I've got a commentary that I might do, although I'm reticent to do that particular commentary with those 2 people, but I might do it. We'll see. And I got a bunch of videos coming out. I was going to post one today, but I got caught up with other things. It'll be posted for members maybe tomorrow at the latest, tomorrow afternoon at the latest. And then I'll release it on Tuesday. And then I've got another video already recorded and editing. So we're nicely ahead of everything. So we're doing good. We're doing good. I got more to record, but I haven't come up with any ideas for next week's live stream yet. But I shall come up with something. And again, if you have a particular topic, you can put it in the comments and maybe I can do that particular topic. But please do it like way before Friday. Some of these topics take a long time. Identity's been brewing for a while, obviously. And the last 3 were easy because it's stuff I talk about all the time anyway. But yeah, newer topics that maybe I haven't thought through and how to, a lot of this is just linking it back into all the things I've already talked about before so that I don't have to do 100,000 references. So the nice thing for me about this talk is it references a bunch of other material that I already have. So if you're confused about the terminology, you can actually just go and look it up, which makes it easy. At least in my opinion. And hopefully this also, you can start to see where the identity crisis comes from and why it matters and what people are protecting. They're trying to protect this idea of, quote, individual freedom, which is just freedom from constraint and consequence, right? Because if you were an individual, or if that was a possible configuration of the universe, which absolutely is not, then yeah, the things, what you would be talking about are freedom from constraint and consequence, right? The freedom to be and do whatever you want and have whatever results you want from that. And once you understand that that's what the pronoun nonsense is, and that's what the whole idea of having an identity is all about. I mean, having an identity. You don't have your own identity. That's, ridiculous way to talk about the world. It makes you sound kind of nutty, and maybe you need some medication that hasn't been invented yet. I don't know. But once you get a sense for that, then hopefully you can see how all this stuff sort of links together and comes together in this big disastrous way. And that is part of the problem, is identity has turned out to be a disaster because we've tried to do it on our own. And I think the larger pattern that you're going to see is when we try to do things on our own, they become a disaster. And on our own, so I didn't get a lot through it, but I got a little bit through Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan. I've talked to Rachel before. I like her. She's really whip smart. Feminism is an identity crisis. What are women? Oh, we don't know since the feminist movement took over. We don't know what a woman is anymore. That's because of the feminist movement, guys. And Rachel Wilson's the expert on this. She's got an excellent book about the topic. The Occult Roots of Feminism. Uh, I haven't read it, but I know a lot of that history as well. And of course, I've done a video on that with Father Eric and Adam. Oh, look, there's Father Eric now. You can't medicate your way out of a meaning crisis. Well, that is true, Father. You can't medicate your way out of a meaning crisis. Uh, can't medicate your way out of nearly anything. It can help you temporarily. And if it's not temporary, is it medication? I wonder. The larger problem here is that just separating men and women and then making them equal again, at least we'll say through voting or something, through political power, that's the way to say it, uh, immediately creates an identity crisis of what is a woman. If everyone can vote equally, what is a woman? I don't know. It makes it harder. The feminist movement makes it hard to know what a woman is because it's an equality doctrine. And if everything's equal, you can't tell it apart from you or anything else. And then the struggle for identity begins. And again, you can persecute that two ways. You can either try to rise above or below everybody, or you can just try to tell everybody what to do and conflict with them and never cooperate. It's up to you, really, because it's your free will. Or you could always take the third way and actually cooperate with people instead and recognize that you ain't all that in a bag of chips. And it turns out you can negotiate your identity and at least improve it, which would be better. I like the be better thing. Maybe I just hate John Vervaeke enough to identify against opponent processing, which would be ironic. See, the thing is, the world needs you to be better. That's, it's not optional, really. So that's what we should be working on. That's what should happen. Oh, look at this. I messed up my glasses. There we go. What we need to work on being better. And if you don't have a clear identity and you're not improving upon that identity, and you're not identifying what's in the world and what is good about the world and what is bad about the world, then you're going to have a hard time being better, even if you want to be better. So like now you have two problems, right? I think that's really the problem. Can we identify what a problem is? No, we just call everything problematic if we don't like it. If our emotions are jiggered, we go, oh, it's problematic. What are you talking about? Why are you problematizing the world? Then that means there's a solution for it, eh? I don't know, man. Don't seem to be solutions for everything. Some things just are. Those things that just are, that don't have solutions, I would probably just call that reality. You'll notice that all the people that don't know, oh, what is reality? We're not sure how to define reality. Everything's a problem to them. I wonder if that's in any way, shape, or form completely connected to the problem of not understanding reality, or rather, not accepting reality. Continually believing that you can remake the world using your technological tools of science. And then coming up with the inevitable conflict of the fact that all science, all independent validation, and really all what we would identify as technology comes from war. Oops. And then science not wanting to participate in war because it's above that somehow, allegedly, even though it is born from war. It's born from the requirements of war level conflict. In all cases, with no exceptions, by the way. I'm just going to let you know now. And you can say, oh, these sciences were developed during peacetime. Oh, really? With mystical peacetime dollars and no view towards how they would fix a problem that would also benefit somebody in a conflict? Are you sure about that? Because I got questions if that's what you think. And that's what I mean by identity. Have you identified where this technology comes from, what technology even is? Or did you just write a cool essay that talks about how we're all caught up in the things around us, and some of those things we refer to as technology? Thanks, genius. I think I already knew that somehow by the fact that I was living within it. But the fact of the matter is, the Amish proved that technology does not rule your life and does not need to. Oops. And what's the exemption that everybody talks about for the Amish, by the way? Oh, well, they won't fight in a war. And if they didn't have people fighting in a war around them, they would lose. So technology is only useful for war then, huh? So it would seem. And that, my friends, concludes my destruction of Heidegger and all his retardedness. Well, maybe not all of it. All of his retardedness about technology. I don't know why people are like, "Ooh, Heidegger." I'm like, really? He's kind of stupid, but I guess if that's your guy, that's your guy. That's your Superman. That's your exemplar. You want to be like Heidegger or Immanuel can't think very well. That's fine by me, I guess. I'll take the points. These people are nitwits. Nitwits with big vocabularies and flourishy language for sure, but nitwits nonetheless. That was our biggest problem, making nitwits literate. Ugh, what a stupid idea. And we used our goofy technology to make nitwits literate, and now we are suffering the consequences of literate nitwits. They're all over the internet. The internet is flooded with literate nitwits. People that call themselves agnostic atheists. Which is amazing to me that anybody can do that and not immediately have their head explode like in the movie Scanners. I'm like, huh. I thought physics would be more rigorous than that. I guess not. And you'll notice that all the big, quote, scientific questions are questions about reality. And all the great scientific breakthroughs are things that seem to allow an alteration of what was previously perceived to be reality. Could just be a coincidence, of course, except it's not. Ixnon, make illiteracy great again. Yes. I think I can get behind that. Yeah, I mean, just giving people big vocabularies and giving them the freedom to use it in a broadcast medium just seems to have been a really bad idea. And also, I mean, and years before that, right? I mean, the argument, I mean, unfortunately was lost, but was already engaged with that. Wow, things like reality TV are dangerous because you're putting very unsophisticated people on the screen, and then people are going to exemplify that. And yeah, they kind of did. And man, society collapsed much more quickly when that happened. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. I mean, on the one hand, no one noticed. On the other hand, everyone's suffering for it and not noticing, right? So that was double bad. So I think that, hopefully from the monologue, you get a sense for why the struggle for identity is a big deal and what's driving it and why it's so important all of a sudden when in the past it was a given. Like everybody knew what their identity was and how to deal with it and what to do about it and all of these other important things. And now they don't. Christopher, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. Yes.
Uh-oh. Now we've got trouble.
Oh, nice.
Here comes trouble.
How's it going, Father?
Everything is going well. It's Lent.
Yes.
And good things happen during Lent, as long as you've got your eyes focused on the right things. So
you should identify as a Lent doer.
as a Lent doer during the season of Lent, along with all of the other Lent doers,
Excellent.
because it's a communal thing. And you know, when I didn't listen to the whole monologue. I was doing things that I think were valuable. But I think I've always thought about identity is trying to locate it within Aristotle's categories.
Mm.
You've got substance, and then the three types of accidents: quality, quantity, and relation.
Mm.
Right. It's like, okay, well, identity doesn't help you if you're trying to consider it as a substance, right? Because we've got
Right.
three human substances. Which one is which, right? That doesn't help us. If you try and make it a quantity, it's like, oh, that doesn't make any daggone sense. And so, what I think people try and do is they try and make their identity a quality of themselves. You know, I am a white man because I burn easily in the sun, but I also make vitamin D easily, you know? And that's
Yeah.
actually, you know, like they're trying to locate it in a quality of themselves. I think that's where a lot of the silliness comes from, right? Because people end up with really horribly stupid and unhelpful self-identities. Like, I'm a straight man, you know? And it's like, well, yes, sure, that's a quality that inheres in you, but like, what? Like, how does that help us locate you amongst all the other human beings in the world there? And so, as far as I can tell, the only place that you can locate identity is in relation, the
Yes.
way you relate to, well, something outside of yourself. And so, calling me a Lent doer is a bit of a funny thing, right? But like, oh, a member of the Catholic Church, now that's an identity that I could get behind right there, because it establishes a relationship between, you know, me and God, hopefully, me and
Hopefully.
the hierarchy of the church, me and the other members of the church, and all sorts of, and then boom, the whole thing starts to work because you located your identity in relation rather than quality.
Yes. Well, I would argue that's not even quality. And so, only for you, Father, I will do this. I will reread my opening. Well, also for my ego, because I came up with this. I thought it was just absolute genius. I'm like, damn, I'm good. Right. So I kind of started this out with, before the great evil of science, we lived in an enchanted world. Then we were given a knife. And since then, we have dissected everything. That was my opening salvo, we'll say. And then I proceeded to say we've reduced things to properties.
Mhm,
And that's the problem,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Because the problem when you reduce things to properties instantly becomes which properties are important and which ones aren't, and why.
Combinatorial explosiveness from
Combinatorial explosion confirmed, right? And I didn't sort of go over that, but I'm glad you brought this all back up. But yeah, that is the issue. It's like, well, which properties do we pick, and why do we pick those particular properties? And then the other problem with properties is, if you don't know why they're important, you can pick the correct property, but you'll have the wrong aim in valuing it, and so you'll get the value completely wrong.
yeah, and that's, I mean, it's super helpful to have this all sorted out properly, you know, because
Yeah.
I have all sorts of properties that you might want to consider in priesthood, and you know, I could be a little forthright and aggressive sometimes, especially when I get all fired up, right? And you know, how do I discern whether or not that's a quality I need to be using or cultivating at any given moment? Well, we have to look at our favorite thing, final cause, to understand that. Like, okay, what is it exactly you're trying to do here, Father Sites? You know, if we were going to be denouncing error, something that we should obviously all be, you know, like getting a little fired up, getting a little direct, you know, looking at the congregation and saying, do you really need to be on Facebook? Is that actually helpful for you? Watch yourself. See how you feel afterwards. Well, that forthright directness is going to be a really helpful thing right here. Whereas if I'm dealing with somebody who's in the midst of grief at the loss of a beloved family member, yeah, it's like, okay, which qualities do I need to be using here? And so it's only in like knowing your relationship, to the final cause, right? Trying to be a good priest and give glory to God, and then also the relationship to whoever it is that you're dealing with, that you can even know which of these qualities are going to be useful for me. So that's what I'm going to preach on this weekend. I'm going to tell people to put their phones down. So
Good.
I see. I had fish for dinner, Father. So I want you to know that.
Okay.
Of course, we have fish every Friday, but
Good. That's
yes.
Yeah. Love to hear it.
Panda person. Okay, Kirk. I just got here. Why do you do this to us, Kirk? Why? Out of curiosity, Mark, did you discuss Vervaeke's notion? No, almost certainly not, because anything about identity is going to be in opposition to everything Vervaeke ever talked about. Vervaeke's notion of our self-understanding being dialogical. Yeah, Vervaeke does not have a definition of dialogical because no one does, because they're all full of something. And that's the big problem with this, right? So I got into this little discussion with somebody about a paper that he wrote that he wanted people on the server to look at. And I had some time, so I read through it. And my comment on that, this will become relevant, I promise. My comment about that paper was, geez, this sounds a little dualistic. And so his comment back was, well, what sorts of things can I read to understand your idea of dualism and this philosophical dualism? And I said, no, this isn't a philosophical concept. Dual means two, guy. Like you're using two things, right? And that's an error. That's binary thinking. Binary thinking is an error. We do not live in a binary world. I know that everything we're doing here is binary. At some level, believe me, I understand that far better than probably anybody you're ever going to meet. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because it's verifiable fact. Boy, do I understand how binary and technology works all the way down and up the stack, right? Like this is just something I know really well. I can describe to you everything that's happening in the StreamYard and all the other places that it's going and all the protocols involved, except one or two, and how all that works. Okay, I get that, but we do not live in a binary world, and that is 100% certain because we can create ourselves or manifest binary things. And if you have binary things that you can manipulate, that means you have to be above or higher or outside of the binary. It's that simple. Like none of this is hard, right? And so we don't live in a binary world. Logical. This is a two thing. What is binary? This is all binary garbage. Okay, it's all dualistic. It's all junk. You'll notice, Kirk, that when people talk, they'll often, especially the so-called philosopher people, they'll often play this game where they'll go, well, I'm not a dualist. And then they'll list exactly two things. And I'm like, you say you're not a dualist, but then you give exactly two items. Now, either you don't know what dual means or you're lying to yourself about what you are. You're definitely a dualist if you're putting things in a dual frame with only two items. There's no other option. Just the language doesn't function in any other reasonable way. And so we're not dialogical beings. I think, I'm not sure with Vervaeke, even though I know his work really, really well, exactly what he's talking about. But I think what these nitwits are because they're all nitwits on this topic. Well, I think what they're referring to is the fact that because you can sometimes glimpse some aspect of yourself without what seems to you to be without outside help, that therefore you can know yourself and have a conversation with yourself, roughly speaking. This is the Carl Jung thing. And actually, if you're on my server in Need to Explore, there is actually, it's quite a wonderful paper. I actually like the paper for the most part. It's just got some framing issues where it's the beginning of the first paragraph of page 3. Thank you, Christopher. I don't know how you do that, by the way, but that was good. To be fair, I had gotten there right when you said it, but he talks about Jung's problem, and Jung has this problem, right? Because once you say, well, there's a self inside of you, you're screwed. Like identity falls apart. And that was, to be fair, that was one of the great insights from that paper that I used in this talk, because I'm a pirate and I'm just taking stuff. I'm just grabbing galleons in the sea, sinking them and taking the treasure, baby.
I mean, it's like you don't have a theory of virtue at that point. You couldn't possibly have a theory of virtue right there if the self is inside yourself, because it's like we're doing the 40 days of Lent, we're doing the prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Well, why would you do that if the self is already inside of you and you just got to go find him, right?
Well, and the
Meanwhile,
worst part
like
is,
a proper universe, it's like, no, you need to be better,
right?
Because you're in a process of being created through all of the stuff that we're doing.
Well, you run into a bunch of problems. So the first, well, maybe not the first. One of the big problems you run into is which of the things inside of you is yourself and which of the things is not. And what does that even mean at that point?
Is it my desire to eat an entire tray of brownies? Is that who Father Seitz is?
Oh, no, Father, it's way worse. The thing that is looking at or for the self cannot also be the self. And therefore, what the hell is that? And if you did away with it because you found the self and you cut that part out, what would even happen to you? Like, none of this makes any sense at all. And it's not that it doesn't make any sense. It cannot ever, under any circumstances, all other factors changeable, ever be made sense of, which means you can make up whatever you want, but it won't work because it won't be correct. You can't understand anything using that particular framework. It won't function for you. And you will end up carving or trying to carve out parts of the thing inside you, looking for your true self or whatever, or trying to transcend what you are, quote, now, in favor of something that you could or will or should become. And like that, this is just a path to destruction. And in the meantime, you can't cooperate and tell people, no, it's page 3. It's the first paragraph. Which is very helpful because I didn't remember.
Yeah, I think this gets to one of the things that
Correct.
you've said before. Well, one of the things Mark says occasionally
so is existentialist concept of authenticity is nonsensical. Of course it is. Of course it is. First of all, existentialism is nonsensical. Think about what they're trying to say with the term existentialism. What does that philosophy? Did you read what that philosophy actually purports to do? Because it's just impossible. It's just silliness. The whole framework's silly. And this is the problem when you engage with silly people. Peterson sort of hints at this, right? At one point, he's done it a couple times, but at a couple points, he says, hey, I read Lacan and I can't make any sense of him. And guys like Vervaeke have come to his defense, which is actually, I think, really important, right? Vervaeke's amazing. Like, he just knows so much stuff. It's kind of frightening. It's like, oh, people like this exist? This is kind of whoa, right? He says, no, I can't make any sense of Lacan either. Okay, so the guy wrote a book. No one can make any sense of the book. Who's at fault? Is it the people reading the book? Or is it the author made something up?
No, now, Mark, it's the patriarchy.
It's definitely the patriarchy. Father, you got to listen to Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan, man. Whoo. First 25 minutes is gold. Also, she's talking about a lot of our stuff, but that's hysterical to me. But the problem comes in that what are you putting into the text that you're reading, especially if you're postmodern, right? Because you're just going to inject a bunch of things and say, oh, when Nietzsche says it's the death of God, he's saying a good thing. No, he's saying a bad thing. Like, which is it? Or is it both? And what does that mean? Oh, maybe Nietzsche's not making any sense, and you're making sense of him despite the fact that he's saying gobbledygook. Because I did read Thus Spake Zarathustra, and it's not that everything Nietzsche says is complete garbage or anything, but some of it is, right? I mean, in the same way that Carl Jung, some of the stuff Carl Jung says is complete garbage. And if you can't discern the two, the garbage from the good stuff, you might think, well, this is good stuff and this is really good stuff, when in fact it's just garbage. And so that is the problem when we try to do this by ourselves. This is why when people say things like read old books, I'm like, why would you tell anybody that? What is wrong with you can't say that to people. They're not going to understand. Did they understand Moby Dick? Because some people interpret Moby Dick as like a feminist tome. Like, I mean, I've seen it. It's like, this isn't an imaginary thing.
There aren't any women in the book. There's like 4 women total.
Well, that's the proof. That's the proof that feminism is correct, and all the men die. Like, obviously, the women wouldn't, if they were in charge, they wouldn't have had a sailing ship. But who would kill the poor whales? The whales were right. They weren't even right whales. A little cetacean humor for you there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, is that interpretation, if you leave it up to a single person, especially yourself, you're in a lot of trouble. This is why identity is important, because you have to know, oh, I'm the kind of idiot that's going to read Plato's Republic, Book 7, The Allegory of the Cave, and think it has anything whatsoever to do with the individual or a person. Holy crap, is it not about that? It is as not about that as anything could ever be about anything. Kirk, what do you got for us, Kirk? Hit us up.
So I wanted to say, what you're saying makes sense to me, but there's a limit to it, which is, couldn't you say that? Aren't you just recycling the postmodern argument, but in a different frame? Like, yeah, you can't interpret a text in a singular way, but that doesn't mean that there's not an underlying structure to meaning itself.
No, I mean, the postmoderns caused the death of the author. I'm saying, no, the author knew what the hell the author was doing for the most part. And the fact that there isn't a single message is called duh. And the fact that somebody doesn't know that means they're an idiot. And I mean that technically. I mean, technically, you're stupid. You cannot write in any language ever that's ever been devised by humans and make only one point that can only be interpreted one way. That's actually not possible. It's well known and it's proven mathematically, which is why this is so puzzling to me. Like, did you ever read a paper on this ever? Because the data's out there. Okay. So the postmoderns don't have any points. Okay. They're just really bad people, all of them, who didn't want to be judged for being really bad, horrific, awful humans. That's it. That's their whole trick. And I'll tell you who else's trick that is. Almost every other person. This whole idea after Aristotle that there is even a thing called philosophy is garbage. It's a garbage concept. There's theology, and everything else is a footnote to Plato. That's it. It's that simple. That is an argument in philosophy, that everything is a footnote to Plato. Everything after Plato. This is something that philosophers have been saying I didn't make that up. Yeah, I reframe it in the most extreme possible way as there is no philosophy after Aristotle. Yeah, that's the same statement though, guy. And this is the problem, right? It's our inability to recognize a simple basic fact like that. And that is a simple basic fact. You want to know the difference between ideology and philosophy? It's very, very simple. An ideology doesn't account for children. It's a flat system. It doesn't account for change in time. If you don't account for change in time, you have an ideology. what you have will always lead to one or more ideologies. It will never be able to build the city that is in the Republic. And guess what Plato mentions as a driving force in the Republic? Children. It's actually in there. So I feel very confident making this statement.
You think? I mean, I think another thing about, let's say, ideology I can't account for is old people as well.
Right. Yeah. It wouldn't be able to account for old and young.
Yeah, the extremes. It can't account for the extremes. You know, there's something pernicious about phrasing yourself in an obscure way, because there are things that are genuinely really difficult to understand, and when you first hear it, you're not necessarily really going to understand it, right? But when you maybe come back to it after a transformation of your character and the capacity to understand why something like that would be important, you can come to an appreciation of what that actually means, and it might actually be, helpful to you. But if you haven't, let's say if you're an immature character, you haven't grown in prudence, you haven't grown in wisdom, the obscure sayings are all going to sound the same. So an obscure saying that is true, like maybe one of the harder sayings of Christ, that will seem just as obscure to you as something that just doesn't make sense. And yeah. And
obscure intelligent and obscure stupid are both obscure, and you can't tell good from bad in that case, because so when you see something
unless you're participating in something good that's ennobling your character, and you can just tell that something's not right, but it's not necessarily logically available to you immediately.
But then you're looking at fruits and using intuition. Mm-hmm. And now we're out of the realm of what anybody would call philosophy, thank goodness, right? And we're back into the realm where even the illiterate do better than everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. And that's actually super important. And I did want to catch up. Sally Joe, and individuate yourself into a meaning crisis. Yes, that is typically what happens. And drink, eat, drug yourself into a meaning crisis. Many ways into the meaning crisis, and they all go down. Yeah, they do, and they end in this nihilism. Now, you may die of something else before you hit the nihilism, but like this is not a glowing review for meaning crisis. Like, this is not a plus.
Okay. I mean, I think when people quote Feynman as saying, "Oh, well, if you can't explain it to a fifth grader, you don't understand it yourself," I think that's obviously nonsensical, because you do understand it yourself.
It's not, no, Kirk, it's not nonsensical. It makes perfect sense if you're in the university and you're a professor and you're insulting other professors. Because you know what? That's your freaking job. Like, if you're a teacher and you're supposed to teach something and you can't teach it, then you don't know it well enough to teach it. That is true. So I understand that you could look, I'm not, we'll say, a particular fan of Feynman. I don't hate him or anything, right? But like, he wasn't wrong, but you can't pull that quote out and apply it to other people. You can't do that. Like, that's unfair. And knowledge works backwards from the way an academic will tell you it works. Knowledge is something you have inside of you first. So there's a bunch of things I can just do on a computer that I cannot explain to anybody. And I'm really good at them, but I can't explain it. I can't explain it while I'm doing it. That doesn't mean I don't know it. That's not what that means. Now, if I'm trying to teach somebody a computer concept, which I am actually rather good at, that's different, right? If I'm in the role of teacher, that's my identity, and I can't explain it to my students. And see, the other problem with Feynman is that Feynman was playing to an audience. You know who that audience isn't? Everybody outside of an actual academic institution. He's playing to other academics. Academics love to make jokes. And their method of humor is very unique. I happen to enjoy it. Sometimes I'm very good at it, so I can beat most of them because they're a little on the slow side when they think, thankfully. And I've done it. I've done it for years. I lived in Boston. I hung out at MIT and Harvard and Boston University and Northeastern. Like, I've been to all these places like many times. They're all within a mile of each other or something stupid, right? They're very close. There's lots of schools in Boston. Okay. They have a very unique sense of humor. That joke doesn't work outside of academia. Okay. Or that insult and that, yeah, that's actually an insult. Feynman was famous for insults. Intellectuals love to do backhanded compliments and sneaky underhanded insults to one another. They love it. They thrive on it. Like, they think Douglas Adams is the funniest man alive. I like Douglas Adams. He's not the funniest man alive. I'd rather listen to Bill Cosby on audio back in the day before he got his TV show and all that nonsense. Bill Cosby is much funnier to me than Douglas Adams. I still like Douglas Adams' work, by the way. I still can't get into Dirk Gently, but whatever. It's okay. It's not unfunny.
Just remember that Douglas Adams and Scott Adams are not the same person.
That's true too.
Useful to remember that.
Also, not a super fan of Scott Adams. I read was it Win Bigley? Win Bigley was a good book. I read that in Scotland, actually. I think I read the whole thing in Scotland.
And you didn't conquer Scotland?
Huh?
How could you say you won Bigley if you didn't conquer Scotland?
If I didn't, well, I didn't implement it in Scotland. I implemented it when I got home. No, yeah, I mean that's part of the problem is that people are grabbing stuff out of the ivory tower and applying it as if anybody in the ivory tower would even know that it could be applied outside of the ivory tower, because people in the ivory tower don't know that there's anything else. Like, they actually don't understand that other people have different perspectives. Like John Vervaeke, I love John. I've talked to John, right? Like, I still consider John a friend, right? But also John does not understand that some people can't be dialogical by his definition. Like, I'll just grant him whatever definition he wants. Some people can't do that. And by some, I mean almost everybody, right? I mean, the number of people that can engage in dialectic the way he defines it is a vanishingly small number. And he's very lucky because he has access to a large number of them. And that fools those people into thinking, because they're surrounded by those other people, that this is a common trait when it's clearly not.
You've got to go to Walmart a little more often.
Yeah.
See the folk, the people.
Yeah. I mean, just to your point about taking things out of context in academia, I think what you're talking about is a point that Vervaeke integrates well with the point Vervaeke makes about intelligibility, which is when you take a concept and try to place it in every context, you're getting rid of the relational context that makes it intelligible to begin with, which is why, so the postmodern insistence that there is no meaning because meaning is contextual is nonsensical, because there's no such thing as non-contextual meaning. Right? So it's like they're saying that the form of intelligibility is what disqualifies intelligibility.
Right.
Which is exactly what Kant's argument also regarding perception was.
Right. The problem is these very obvious things, A, don't need to be stated, and B, are completely misframed. It's very flat. Okay. Intelligibility is not a matter of perspective, and it is not a matter of context. It is a matter of perspective plus context plus a pre-existing order. There has to be a pre-existing order. They will, if you listen to them long enough, work up to that. They'll get right on the door of pre-existing order, and then they'll run away. And if you want to hear this, because you can't see it because it's whatever, but you can hear it. Jordan Peterson did a talk with Dawkins, not the one they did, the last one they did, but the one before that, where he basically assaulted Dawkins all the way to his next appointment. And then he basically pointed out to Dawkins, hey, that would mean I have to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote. I almost never remember quotes, right? That would mean there's a pre-existing order, says Dawkins in a shocked voice, and then runs away because, well, A, he had to go anyway. He's just being way too polite to Dr. Peterson. And B, he was scared, and you could hear it in his voice. You could hear it in his voice because that means that something or some force or some power or some entity or however the hell you want to frame it must have pre-existed and put that order in place somehow.
And
otherwise,
this all men call God.
Right, which any normal person would just refer to as God, whether it's the same God as, we'll say, Father Eric agrees to or not, is irrelevant. The concept is still there. And so what ends up happening is that you get a panic from these people because that's the one affordance they can't make in their own psyche, is that there's this pre-existing order, and then there's a context which gives you a set of abilities to orient, or a set of affordances to orient within, right? And then there's perspectives within that, right, which helps you to do the orientation, and that has to be there. Otherwise, if there isn't a pre-existing order, evolution cannot be made any sense of. It wouldn't exist. There's no way to make the theory of evolution work unless there's a standard to measure against. And if there's a standard to measure against, it has to pre-exist the things that are happening to be measured against it. Period. End of statement. Right? So all of these people are wasting their time because they're starting bottom up and trying to put the Legos together to rebuild God. But you can't rebuild God from the Legos of materialism. It can't be done because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That statement means a lot more than people understand. What it means is that you can't dissect something and then put it back together and expect to get the same thing, which is what we did with identity. That was the whole point. I know you didn't listen to the whole thing. It's fine. That was the whole point of the monologue, was here's what we did to identity, and now we have two problems. Not one, two.
Yeah, I caught up with part of it, and I think your point makes sense. And I'll just, I know you're, even though you don't think that her philosophy is or her ideas are complete, I know you're generally an Ayn Rand fan. So I'll leave you some words of wisdom from an associate of Ayn Rand's, which is, there are no absolutes they proclaim, while omitting the fact that they're proclaiming an absolute. We can't know anything they claim, despite the fact that they're claiming to know something.
Right. Yeah, this is always the problem. And the reason why they do that is because they think that there is a place called objective material reality, and that is where they are standing. And that is why I wish Jonathan Peugeot would go back to asking people where they're standing, because it's such a good question, right? Because basically what you're saying is, who the hell are you to make this claim? Like, on what authority are you making this claim? Because that's what it really boils down to, right? Science wants to be the authority for all claims because scientists want to be certain. And certainty means you can't have change. Because the minute you have change, if only for a brief instant, you wouldn't have certainty after the change happened. And then you'd have to reassert the certainty again. And that's
you'd have to do calculus. Calculus is a pain in the butt.
Well, and it's so calculus is a great example because I don't think, I mean, most people don't realize it. See, I'm math retarded and I can't do anything like calculus. But the thing you notice about calculus is that it's all approximations at the end. So what they do is they say, well, we have this approximation that we use that gets us as close to infinity as possible, and then we just round everything up. And then we use symbols to do it. So you don't actually notice that that's what's going on. And then that's actually the reason why I know this is that's actually how computers do calculus calculations, right? And they work. It's like, well, why do these work? If this is fundamentally an analog calculation, the computer shouldn't be able to do it at all. Like, it should be off far enough that you would notice. And it turns out it's not off far enough for you to notice. And that's because it's all approximations.
You know, I remember watching like a calculus explained in 20 minutes video and being like, wait a minute, those are all just approximations right there. You're just like getting really close to the space of the area underneath the curve there, but
Yep.
like you never actually get there.
You never get there.
Yeah, huh?
But
Which is
you get
probably good enough for science. It was good. It's certainly good enough for engineering. You know, it's like you know, who cares if we're 0.01% off? Like our margin of error is 3% of the calculations we did, so like that's not going to hurt us.
And the results are actually what anybody would classify as miraculous. I don't know if you saw, there was a video recently about the ASML device in the Netherlands that they designed to do chips.
Mm-hmm. The Veritasium, your favorite channel.
Yeah, the Veritasium. Yeah, my favorite channel. No, that was an excellent video. Everybody should watch it. Actually, it's kind of like what, because they start describing what they're doing, and you're like, there's no way they can do any of this. Like not like, oh, this one piece of the device. It's like, not only do each individual piece that they're talking about, not only are those completely off the table, but timing them all together and making it work is definitely a double impossible.
But look, if these things didn't work, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Well, that's not entirely
These machines exist.
You could easily make these machines just as fast with the old tech. You don't need that machine. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, the point in fact is my processor was made on one of those machines.
This hardware, maybe. Which generation of Intel do you have?
Intel.
Do you have an AMD?
I have an AMD.
Oh. I don't know. Which generation do you have? Because it might be the old tech.
I think it's a Zen 3.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. It might be that Zen 3 needs the new stuff. But
I spent way too much money on it. It was a bad investment, frankly, for what I use it for. But it's there now. It's plugged in.
No, it wasn't.
5900X. I was a little.
I have my last 3 laptops. They all still work, Father. Look, that's stretching back like 12 years. I have 12 years of working computers. The other one that's over there doesn't work well enough to do this anymore because it had random crash problems. But it works well enough to do a bunch of things. But most of your computers are so underutilized. And we just live in that world. And the problem is you have to buy the new hardware because the software keeps getting slower. Right?
What did they say? That software engineering's undone like 30 years of advancement in chip technology and architecture.
Easily. Yeah. Easily. It's horrible. It's horrible. Having been there and watched it all, it's like you watch some of these retro channels, and there was an article, it was years ago now. There was an article once on it wasn't an article, it was a question or something on I think it was on Stack Overflow, and somebody was like, oh, I saw the this Nintendo cartridge, and it only had, I forget what it is, I never played Nintendo, 256K of memory, and that's
a big cartridge right there.
How did they fit all that game into that memory? And one of the guys, I think he was probably one of these cartridge engineers, because there's still a few of them left, he actually described all the ways that they compress the data to get it into that small space. And it just, just crazy stuff that basically no one learns how to do anymore or would bother with, right? And yeah, see, that's the world I grew up in, though, so I actually know how it works.
I mean, like the guys at Nintendo were writing the entire game in x86 assembly.
Well, I mean, some have different development machines. All the best games were written on the Next, which like Doom and Quake and all that was all Next machine stuff, which I have one of in the shed. Someday I'll get the Next. I have a color Next Cube with the color monitor and the black and white monitor. So I'll get it out one of these days.
Oh, dual screen setup. That's fancy.
No, you needed it. And then you could write your code on black and white monitor because it doesn't matter. They didn't colorize code back then. No one did. It was pointless. We're all writing in C.
You just had to be good.
Well, or you could do what I did back in the day before Linux was 1.0. I submitted bug fixes to Linux kernel, and the way I did it, because I'm lazy, and I was actually a pretty good engineer back in the day, I just formatted the code. I didn't even read it. I formatted the code, and then I could see the a bunch of, you can't get every bug or anything. I wasn't trying to get every bug. There's a certain type of bug, call off by one errors. And there's a couple of others that you find this way, but you format the code and then you don't even have to read it. You go, oh, once the code is, I call it formatted correctly. We're going to have a code format wars because we did back in the day. That's real. If you format it my way, and there's one other way that's valid, I would argue all the ways that aren't one of those two ways are invalid. You can find these off by one errors like nothing. You just boom, 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 boom. And of course I had high resolution 24-inch CRT monitors and all this other nonsense going on. So I could put a full function on the screen and just tell you right away, now that's got a bug. So I used to submit those code edits. They're not under my name. I did everything on the internet anonymously when I was young because I didn't know any of the stuff I know now. How do you think I learned it? I made all those mistakes. It's like, this isn't that hard. Not the meaning crisis stuff. That got resolved as a result of my survival. But all this identity stuff and anonymity and decentralization versus I've been down all those roads. I've tried all that stuff. I know why it doesn't work. I know why people like it. We already went through all this. It's unnecessary to go through it again with the general population. We should have stayed on the computer world where it belonged.
Yeah, well, that's kind of one of the advantages of having older brothers is you can just watch what they do, and if something works, you can keep it. Yeah, if something doesn't work, and you just don't do that. And well, I've got 3 older brothers, so I kind of credit that for turning out as well as I did.
Only child, Father. That was my mistake.
It was your mistake.
Absolutely.
Literally, you were the last person who could claim that as a mistake.
I know. That's what makes it funny.
No, I don't think you understand. What you said doesn't make any sense.
Well, it was interesting. We had this little discussion about these absurd poems and how we don't teach absurd poems to kids anymore. That's part of the problem. I agree with Sally Joe about that. Like, she learned a bunch of absurd poems. She can recite a couple of them. I'm like, where did you get? Because I didn't get that either. I'm like, where did you even get? Not that I didn't get absurdity, but I didn't
like
get that
Ring Around the Rosie. And
yeah, but no, she has a good one. I can't recite it even. It's why are fire engines? No, it's like, why are fire engines red? Fire engines are red. It goes on this long circular logic that doesn't make any sense of unconnected things, and then it gets back to urgency, and fire engines are always in a hurry, and that's why they're red. And it makes total sense, but it's complete and utter nonsense. It's brilliant. I like it. But she learned a whole bunch of those when she was young, and I was like, I haven't even heard of these. But hearing absurdity gives you contrast to understand things that aren't absurd. Right? Like that's a real phenomena. And we don't teach children that. We don't teach them the fairy tales. We don't teach them good and bad. We don't teach them what to look out for.
We don't troll our children properly. That's what you're telling me. Because that's what you do. It's like,
no.
Now listen, hold on. Well, no, wait a minute here, a young man. You are wearing a yellow shirt right now. That clearly means that you're a dandelion, because dandelions are yellow. And then
stuff
the
like
like,
that.
no, I'm not a dandelion. I'm like, well, you're wearing a yellow shirt, It's
right. Well,
that kind
and
of trolling, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but that teaches you the absurdity of logic and the limits of logic, right? Because that tells you the starting point matters. If you start from shirt color is the determiner of the object, see how it immediately defeats all the things I've talked about for 4 weeks now, right? It immediately exemplifies all of that. And you never run into the problem. You would never run into the problem. You'd be like, well, you already knew from a child interacting with your parents and fighting against their absurdity.
The uncles gave me the worst absurdity.
Whatever.
It's a very avuncular role to troll your children like that. The children need to be able to trust their dad a little more.
Maybe not. But yeah, you need that. You need that level of absurdity, or you won't know what's absurd. And you'll read Lacan and think that he's smart and not some retard that wrote a lot of words and just didn't connect them very well, which is what actually happened, right? So if you can't recognize that because you've never seen it, then or you don't recognize that logic really depends on starting points. You can't defeat logic that is predicated on a lie. You can't defeat it. This is the reason why people are having a problem defeating the gender argument, because they're perfectly happy to engage in a logical argument, and they don't understand that a logic can prove anything at all. Logic can prove two contradictory things at once. Logic is amazing. Also, it doesn't do what you think it does because it can't discern truth, and it can't help you discern truth. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, our education system is meant to teach one of Vervaeke's 4 Ps, the propositional, and that's it. And is that a reason to overhaul our education system? I think so.
No, it wasn't. We don't have an education system in that way. That isn't historically what happened, right? In order to get the education system to be purely, quote, propositional, which is a type of information and not a type of knowledge, despite what Dr. Vervaeke may say, you have to remove certain elements, right? In whole or in part, right? You have to remove gym, you have to remove recess, you have to remove art class, and you have to remove music class. If you do that, then what's left is just propositional. And they did do that starting in the 70s and 80s. They definitely did that throughout most of the schools. And that was because it was federalized. They wanted to equalize education, and they had to measure it. So it's actually a side effect. Now, I'm not saying there weren't dark forces behind it or anything like that. There may have been. It doesn't really matter. If you wanted to make education equal throughout the states, you have to federalize the education, and you have to measure the education. And you can't measure art class, and you can't measure music class, and you can't measure gym, and you can't measure the benefits of recess. You can measure the downstream effects, which Dale Farron has done. So if you read Dale Farron's stuff, she's quite clear about what happens when you take children who we'll say are too young and you put them in a mostly propositional, highly structured environment. They do poorly 30 years later, like across the board. It's in the data. It's in their own scientific data. And they don't want to acknowledge that. Now, is that a, quote, function of education? You could argue it's a function of scaling education up. You could also argue that it's a conspiracy. Does the conspiracy go back to the 1920s? No, it doesn't. It's not the Rockefeller Foundation or the foundation that he helped fund. It's not. I'm sorry. I looked it up. Definitely cannot be that. Right? Definitely a lot of the quotes that people will put on the conspiracy theory aren't in existence anywhere. They don't exist. You can't find those quotes. They're made up. And that's the problem, is that if you want a logical, reasonable, single cause argument for why education sucks, that would be it. But the bottom line is, in a bad school, you can have a good kid, and the good kid can come out just fine, even if it's a public woke school. I've seen it happen. So then the question is, well, what is the interaction? What is the relationship? What is the identification that's going on? You have to have two problems in order for the wokeness to take hold. One is a lack of formation at home, and the other is a bad school. You need both of those, because if you don't have both, the problem doesn't occur. That's why it's not universal. This isn't a magic trick, right? So that's why it's not universally everywhere, and it's not. The woke people may be the loudest, but they're one of the smallest groups out there. And that we should all be thankful for, right? And we should just recognize, if you form your children correctly at home and you work with them on that, the schools will not have the sway to pull off the wokeness, no matter what they do. Possibly until college. So maybe in college you have to be a little more careful, but the solution to that is already evident. Don't ever send your kids to college. Don't let them go to college. Just avoid it. Unless it's completely unavoidable and they're
we're obviously excluding, the consideration of Catholic seminaries from college here. Church needs priests, Mark.
Well, I think we call them seminaries and not colleges because they're different. But
okay. I got a college degree from it, so people might get confused. It's worthwhile to have these clarifications made clear.
It is. I think the best solution is for the damn Catholic Church to stop venerating this stupid secular language and tell them to F off and just call it seminary and proper formation. And then we don't have this problem. I don't know. I don't have a degree. I have a formation in whatever the alleged quote degree was. And
people are so grateful for my degree all the time. They say, Father, we think your degree was wonderful. We really appreciate the 4 years you spent in Detroit and the amount of academic studies that gave you. You know, they see the fruits of my degree all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. You should have seen, oh my God, when my father got his PhD, he was absolutely insufferable. Absolutely insufferable. And the family made merciless fun of him. It was amazing. And to be fair, it worked. It worked. It did help to just pound him constantly about Dr. Lefevre and all that. Because I mean, his degree was in English literature, of all the stupid things in the world.
Well, if you've got money to blow on it, you know, it's not so bad.
We did. No, we were poor. I mean,
oh, okay.
My father denies it, but my mother used to insist that there were a few times we didn't have enough food. I don't know. My mother was a nuts, so it's hard to take my mother seriously. And also my father is not the best recaller of things in the world, especially those things. But like when he went to school, and this is what frosts me. It absolutely infuriates me. So you'll hear a guy like Vervicki, because Vervicki said this once, and I absolutely wanted to go through the screen and strangle him. He said, well, my son is going to graduate with a degree in teaching and not be able to afford his own place to live. And I was like, when in history was anybody ever able to do that? Right? The answer is never. My father had to work, multiple jobs while he was getting his degree, and he had a family. Like, I had been born, right? We moved to Kansas for him to get his freaking PhD. Like, there were 3 of us. I was a baby, basically, right? And he worked in like pest control and other things, right? Now there were advantages back then. So like one of the advantages is because he was, faculty at the university, basically, while he was getting his degree, he was a TA or something. I forget how that worked back then. But basically, because he was a part of the school, I got to go to a Montessori school for free, right? Because we couldn't have afforded to send me to a school. And then I don't know if my mother worked back then or not, but she might have also had a job. But like, we had this apartment, in an apartment complex in the middle of tornado country, and it wasn't great, right? He had a used Volkswagen, right? That's what he drove. Right. That's how we went out to Kansas. We moved the family in a VW Bug, which is not a very large car and does not carry a lot of stuff. And there were 3 people, 2 people and a baby to consider. So, yeah, I mean, that's how it was. And so the idea that now people that are born now should be able to, graduate and already be able to afford their own place to live and start a family is so unbelievably arrogant and absurd to me. Because historically, people who went to school fell in 2 categories, basically 2, and exactly 2. Either they were already from wealthy families, or their families got together enough money throughout the family to send you to school. That was it. And then that changed to 3 categories with the rise of the middle class, at least in the United States. I don't know anything about Europe at this time, right? Where you could work your way through school, because schools basically became cheap enough to do that for people. But this is all, this is 60s and 70s, man. This is super new. It's a new experiment. The experiment failed, okay? Because doing that, or undoing that, destroyed the universities completely. And Peterson won't recognize this. I mean, maybe he could be made to, but he doesn't recognize this now. And it's no wonder why. They want a fever dream of a world. It's a total fever dream. It's a ridiculous world. Like, why, in what universe do you think you'd be able to graduate from school and immediately make a large salary? Why does it even make any sense to the system they purport to be using? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I do think there's some shenanigans going on in the housing market. that might not be helpful. But I don't have the goods to back it up. So
I don't think so, Father. I mean, we went through this during fake news virus scamdemic. And I was explaining to people in 2021, like, there's a house for sale right over there for $65,000. Move-in ready. Maybe you don't want to move into
I
it.
get that, Mark. I get that, Mark. But not everybody wants to move to places where the house is cheap.
That's not a housing market problem. That's an expectations problem. Just like the people who want to graduate college and be able to afford a mansion in New York City. Okay, I would like that too. Unfortunately, I was not born with a trust fund. If you were born with a trust fund, that should be your expectation. If you were not born with a trust fund, you should suck it up, Buttercup, like everybody else does, because the housing market's very bifurcated, right? There's very cheap houses and very expensive houses and nothing in the middle. That's not a housing crisis. You're a retard crisis because you want a house you can't afford. And if you just aim for a house that you could easily afford, you'd easily have a house. You might have a terrible commute by your standard, but you know what? I don't want to hear it. I had a terrible commute and I had an awesome house.
Or a terrible neighborhood.
Yeah.
Most people live in terrible neighborhoods. Cry me a river.
Well, we could do something about the terrible neighborhoods with a certain amount of public policy, probably.
No, I don't think we can. The poor will always be with you.
I think we could, if we're talking about getting rid of woke DAs, like getting rid of the woke district attorneys who won't prosecute crime. Here's the thing. I think to Mark's point is the whole concept of gentrification is an anti-conceptual way of thinking, right? Gentrification is nonsensical. It is literally does not make sense to say that you are entitled to a place just because that's where you were born.
No, that's not gentrification. Gentrification is moving people around. Gentrification is wealthy people moving to poor neighborhoods.
I'm saying the anti-gentrification movement makes no sense.
Yeah, right. No. But that's yeah. The fundamental problem is that your mindset determines what your neighborhood is like. And because a neighborhood is more than one person, you don't have a huge level of control over that. However, every neighborhood I've ever been in is held up or held down by one person or family. Every single one, without exception, because the exemplification is there. It's just the way it is. And that doesn't change. And the problem now is that we've tried to divide the world by socioeconomic measures, which is measured. Like, the nice thing about socioeconomic is it's easily measured. The problem is it's a bogus category and it's a stupid way to think, right? Because then you get they have $1 million home and he killed his wife. Yeah, he did. What good was that? What did we accomplish here? So you don't know if you're living next to a murderer because you live in $1 million neighborhood? Is that better than knowing who to avoid and who not and who to be friends with? I don't think so. I think it sounds worse. And then you get into all kinds of problems about justice because now your peers don't want you to be guilty because it makes them look bad. And that's why people in the upper middle class get off with crimes. That's it. That's the whole reason. There isn't another reason. It's because those people don't want to believe that somebody that is that like them could do that crime. But that's just bad discernment because they chose a bad category of socioeconomics rather than a good category of, was this a good person? Or was he like sleeping around on his wife and jealous? Because that's a very common story, that one. That's a very common story. Like, you can just pick up a newspaper and find that in any given month. Okay, this is just not a good way to think of the world. And then if you notice that socioeconomic way of thinking, those are the same neighborhoods, the so-called suburbs neighborhoods, that end up where people go, well, you don't know your neighbors. Oh, what a weird coincidence. So all the people that have all this socioeconomics in common don't actually talk to each other. What a weird thing. And then what holds the neighborhood together is absolutely nothing. It just all looks the same. Did you ever hear anybody say, oh, these houses all look the same? I wonder why that is. Because it's a bad category that you're trying to stuff people into called socioeconomics. It's just a terrible way to do things. And so you can then gin up other stories like, well, the expansion of the suburbs is due to the blah, 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 blah. All of that may be true, but that's not the driving force. The driving force is identity and the loss of it. And that, you get into weird situations, like you get into the whole white flight situation in Boston, right? Which, that happened when I was a kid. So I don't know that. I wasn't there for that, right? We weren't in Boston, first of all, but I wasn't there for that. But like, you can just look demographically, that happened, right? They tried to mix the schools, and the people who could afford to moved. And that was the end of that. It didn't work. It's just that these things don't work. It's worth figuring out why they don't work and whether or not that's important and significant. And the problem is that people will always make these ridiculous claims. Like, oh, well, they wouldn't allow, colored children, or children of Spanish descent or whatever, into these schools. And it's like, well, now that's not exactly it. It's like, you've got a mostly Irish neighborhood, and the kids weren't there. And the school lines are drawn around the neighborhoods because, of course, they are, because they're funded by the neighborhoods, right? And so these things are going to be the result of. But if a neighbor lived there and happened to not be the same ethnicity, they would be permitted into the schools. And would that cause a problem? Yeah. You know when else it would cause a problem? In every other situation you come up with, because people are people and they don't change just because you change the system around them. Sorry. And that's really the problem, right? So you can do experiments, which have all been done in Boston in particular. So I can just point you to them if you want.
The Puritan lab of America.
Well, and this would be probably considered post-Puritanism, but no, your point is valid. I think they're all Episcopalians too. But what they did was they basically gave the best parts around Boston, south of the city mostly, to the poor people. They settled them there on purpose. And you can read the writings. Like, this isn't magic. I'm not making up a story. You can just read what they wrote about what they thought they were doing and why they were doing it. And they said, look, if you put these people in a good environment, they'll become good people. Okay. You go to Jamaica Plain today. Okay. One side of the lake is fine. And the other side of the lake, you could get mugged or shot or stabbed very easily. Right. And those are mansions. They're actual mansions. But they gave them to the poor people. And the poor people are still acting like poor people because the environment doesn't necessarily work to change everybody. It may change some number of people. That number of people is a single-digit percentage, however. And this is where people get lost.
Well, probably part of the environment is the people that you're around. So,
right, because people affect the environment. And so what happened to Jamaica Plain is it turned into a dump for a while. And then in the 70s, people came in and sort of started to revitalize it. Some parts of the neighborhood got better. Gentrification occurred for sure. Right. I knew people who were landlords in that area. I watched some of these houses being rehabilitated because they own them. and I had friends who had lived there before, for example. And so I knew all about that. I walked there all the time. I hung out quite a bit around Boston. And so like I saw this occur, and you just can't change the conditions. And like they put rent control in Cambridge in the 70s. And you know what happened? Basically the people couldn't afford to keep the houses, so they burned them down. And then they started doing arson investigations. So you know what they did? They blew them up. And that was because the minute they started taking them down with equipment, the city made that illegal. The city of Cambridge is crazy. It's the craziest place outside of California. Cambridge and California are actually the same place somehow. I don't know how this is possible, Like maybe it's an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Spirits can move things in two places at once.
There you go.
It's right there in Aquinas. It was right there in Dionysius too. If you had bothered to have read the celestial hierarchies, you would have known this already.
Sounds like a disease. You have celestial hierarchy. You have 6 weeks to live. Sounds awful.
Well, I only have about 6 minutes to remain awake, so I'm going to spend the rest of my evening praying for us, because I identify as a Catholic, and that means that I am a goober, I am a Fed, I am soy, I am an NPC, I am retarded, and I am going to bed. Good night, and God bless you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Will I see you on Monday,
Thank you.
Father?
Yes, I'm back.
Oh, good.
Sorry
Good.
about our little
Good.
missed week. Good night.
Good night. Oh my goodness. Yeah. This is sort of the fundamental problem of identity, right? Is if you don't recognize your weaknesses, and if you don't recognize you're not merely the product of your environment, but you're not only the product of your environment, and that your interaction with the environment changes the environment and changes you, then you're going to run into problems. And you can't count on other people to be the way you want them to be, or to do the things you want them to do, or to read the books you want them to read, or to understand those books correctly.
Yeah.
And it was Luther's big lesson that, I guess he figured it out at the end, but it was a little too late then. Luther, you moron. What an idiot.
Yeah. I mean, this is the contradiction of Calvinism and of determinism in general. If you're only the product of your environment, this means the statement that you're the product of your environment is also a product of your environment.
Right.
Well, we can also say that there are no arenas with only one agent, and any agent is always in multiple arenas. So
right. I forgot that one, Christopher. Thank you. I forgot all about that. Yeah, that's the flaw in Vervaeke's agent-arena relationship. That's reduction right there. Agent arena. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and that was I remember that because of the last Flannery O'Connor book club. The lady that the story is told from her perspective, it's like she's trying to cram all the agents into this one arena, and that's why part of where she goes off.
That's a brilliant way to see it. I didn't even see that. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I didn't see it from that perspective. That's good. Why didn't you join us, Christopher?
Well, I did leave that as a comment afterward, but so it's on the video for future reference. But
well, that's good. That's good. Yeah. That's sort of an example of flattening from Vervaeke, is the single agent, single arena frame. And look, it's super helpful. It's not a bad thing, right? But it's also completely insufficient. And it's that trap of individualism that psychology gets us into. And he's got a degree in psychology, so it kind of makes sense that he would make that mistake. But it's a mistake. Like, it's a big mistake.
Right.
Well, actually, I would find it interesting that if psychology leads us to individualism, at least because, to my understanding, the psychological sciences, if you even want to call them that, are, to my understanding, pretty female-dominated. And to my understanding, women are statistically more relationally minded than men.
All right. Explain to me in psychology, we'll say more than two, because there are two. More than two terms that refer to more than one object at once.
I don't know if I can, because I'm not that knowledgeable about psychology.
Exactly. So do you know why you can't, Kirk? Because there's only two that I can find. There might be 3 or 4, but like, all the language of psychology is about a single person, and it's from the perspective of that single person out to the world, right? In other words, you had a bad, quote, relationship, whatever that means. Psychology doesn't have any way to classify relationships, by the way, with your mother or your father. And that's why you have this. That's why you have this psychological condition. So far, we're really only talking about one object, right? And we're relating that one object from the perspective of that object out to the world. And that's all that psychology does. And obviously, psychology is not useless or pointless. It may be a bad tool, in my opinion, and that may be backed up by all the data on it, by the way, because it's definitely backed up by all the data. And the tools that psychology gives you can be leveraged by certain, we'll say, really talented individuals to help people. Also, you can do all of those helpful things without psychology at all, which should be kind of a hint as to the value of psychology. And the fact that women flock to psychology just means that it's more in keeping with the sorts of things they care about and want to do. But one of those things is definitely having control over other people through relational, quote, power, or relational control is really the relational force, relational control. That those are better ways to frame it. But people would identify the word power, even though they can't define it very well. And that's why women are there. Also, their other options suck. None of them want to be bricklayers. A little weird, huh? I don't know. They don't want to put roofs on. Strange.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I was just thinking, to get to the point, about women just generally being more relationally minded. You think that they would overcome the individualism in psychology?
No, you can't.
You can't. So it's baked
The
into the system?
language. No, the language won't let you. You are constrained by the tools. And you can't fix the language, because if you changed the framework, all the tools fail immediately. And you know this is true because Carl Jung proved it, right? So they've already had to eliminate the talk of the unconscious or subconscious, right? And the thing that the thing that psychologists hate about Carl Jung's work is the collective unconscious. And the thing is, they keep trying to rename it the zeitgeist and all these other nonsense terms because they can't get around the need for it. It's not possible for them to get around the need for it. But it doesn't work within the psychological framework. And that's why they invent new terms over and over again, right? And because it doesn't fit in the framework. So they have to invent a term outside of the framework. And then they don't have a way to deal with that. And then the next thing you know, you get this thing called sociology, which is just psychology emergently scaled upwards. And sociology is garbage. It's just total trash. I hope my cousin never sees this. She has a PhD in sociology. She's at Chapel Hill right now. Well, no, she's probably in New York City, commuting to Chapel Hill for some reason. So sociology is just scaled up psychology. It's the psychology of groups, effectively. And it's relatively new. All of its predictions so far have been so horrifically wrong that I'm like, why are you doing this? And it's fundamentally trash. Like, I hate to say it, but it's fundamentally trash.
Yeah.
It's not a science. It can't be made into one. And they're pretending like it might be. And that doesn't mean you can't run any scientific experiments at that scale. You kind of can, but there's so many free variables. It's very hard to nail anything down scientifically in sociology. All you can really do is make observations and then make guesses about why it happened that way based on correlations, which is not an invalid thing to do, but it's also not science at all.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying makes sense, that within the tools of psychology, you have to be individualistic. But then the question is, then how do we reform our mental health system? Because we can't get outside of psychology, but we also can't keep using the same tools or axioms that it runs by if we want to keep mentally sane as a society.
Yeah, so you go back to the way things used to work when they worked. It's not that hard. I know John Vervaeke will say we can't go back like 6 times a day, but he's also completely wrong about that. Like, I don't even know how to express how stupid that is. But that is actually a stupid statement, because history is full of us going back. And we go back one of two ways, right? So option one is you can actually back things out very, very carefully and thoughtfully and get it wrong, because we get everything wrong. So that's a given, right? And option 2 is called collapse. So it's up to you, I guess. Like, do you want to go back carefully, or do you want to insist we can't go back and then cause a collapse? Because those are really, that's historically, that's all that ever happens. And I think there's a reason for that. And I think it's a mathematically provable reason. And I don't know why this is controversial. And I don't understand people that say we can't go back. I just don't get any of it. I'm like, I don't even know what you're like. Do you, what is wrong with your brain? Like, there hasn't been a medication invented to fix that for sure. But like, we need to fix that, because that's a mental illness. It turns out that you don't have a mental illness problem when you don't have mental illness. And we didn't used to have a term called mental illness. And we had better systems for dealing with people that will say we're on the margins. And those systems worked brilliantly well compared to the systems we have now. Now, were they great and perfect and wonderful and ideal? No, neither is the system we have now. Doesn't sound like a big change, but it might be cheaper, and it might be better, and it might be easier, and it might make more sense. Is that a worthy trade-off? I'm going to go with yes, but you can make your own mind up, I guess.
Well,
Okay, so
yeah. The description of psychology, whatever, where it's like you have had a bad relationship with your mother, is that's like a very linear and discrete description of a thing. And so it's certainly like too flat to be accurate.
Yeah.
And
So
we can't improve that by like rounding up, all the town drunks and then put them all in one place together over here, away from everybody or something.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And I think I'd have to think about how we would go back. Like, we'd have to, are you saying we would reclassify what counts as mental illness, or we would get rid of the category altogether, or
No, you get rid of the category altogether. It's a new category. All this stuff is brand new. It like fired up yesterday, right? Like, psychology as a discipline is Freud and Jung, and it was only applied to the wealthy class. Like, see, this is the other thing that because we don't understand this. It's like, no. They were doing things for wealthy people. That was it. It only applied to wealthy people. They would never dream of trying to psychoanalyze a poor person. That wouldn't make any sense to Freud or Jung. They'd be like, what are you on high? Are you on drugs? Like, what is wrong with your brain? Of course, this isn't for them, because psychological problems, or we'll say problems that can be treated using mere psychological tools alone, are problems of wealthy people. They are not problems of the middle class, and they're not problems of the lower class. This is, Peterson gets dangerously close to understanding this, which really pisses me off. He's so close, right? He says over and over again, some people just have real problems. And if you just get them to address the real problems, you don't need the psychological tricks. They just fix themselves. It's just fixed. Right. He says it over and over again.
So we should stop pretending that everybody is wealthy and that we should all go to therapy, right?
Exactly. That would do it.
Yeah. That
exactly
would do it makes sense to me, because I've heard someone else tell me that in his opinion, he was saying that everyone should go see a therapist. But then at that point, then there's no such thing as therapy, because the whole point of therapy is that you're trying to distinguish people who need therapy and people who don't.
Right.
So yeah.
These other solutions don't make any sense, and none of them ever will, because they're wrong. And this is the leap that people don't make. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's because you're freaking wrong, dumbass. Like, it's not that hard. It's okay. Like, then you can learn. Like, if the whole thing is you just get to the point where you say, well, that doesn't make any sense, and you never get to the point where that is wrong because it doesn't make any sense, then you're not getting far enough and you're not learning anything. And it's vitally important that you actually learn things, especially from others, because that's a cheap way not to make a mistake, right? There's two ways not to make the mistake for yourself and suffer the consequences, right? One is to watch other people and go, oh, I was stupid, I ain't going to do that. And the other one is to do it in your mind first. The problem is, if you try to do it in your mind first and you're not tuning yourself well to reality, like you haven't grown a bean, you haven't built something with your hands, it's not going to help you. And then you're going to be stuck in the academy because it's the only safe place where you won't cut your hand.
Yeah.
Right? And
I mean,
that's part of the problem.
yeah. The only thing is, I don't know if you've heard of like
Whoops.
But I've heard
Jesus Christ Part 667. That's quite a name. Jung worked in a madhouse. Okay, but who was in the madhouse? And developed his theories of archetypes talking to stragglers. Yeah, probably. But again, who are they applying these things to? Like,
Yeah.
who gets out of the madhouse as the result of talking to Jung and Freud? Approximately 0 people, right? Unless they're wealthy. This is the other thing that we don't understand. Well, even if you watch something like Patch Adams, so you can watch Patch Adams, and there's some caveats to Patch Adams that if you know the real story, it's like, oh, well, that movie makes a lot more sense if you just change it back to the real story. In Patch Adams, he checks himself into a mental institution. He's a freaking doctor. Like, they like, see, I know about this because what is the name of that singer? Anyway, well, there's a bunch of singers, but they all went to there's a mental institution in Belmont, Massachusetts. It's very well known, and it's McLean, I think, is the name of it, right? And so a bunch of the singers that the folk singers in particular, ended up at McLean Mental Institution. Now, I have been there visiting somebody who was a relative who was not wealthy, but they let her in anyway, which is very nice of them. Yeah, it's quite the place. It's a big mental institution on a hill. It's it hasn't changed much since it was built. It's not super old, but it's old enough. And wealthy people used to check themselves into those places all the time. Now, was it only wealthy people in there? No, but there were many mental institutions that were only wealthy people. And they were from wealthy families. Like, wealthy families would have kids. They'd be kind of defective in whatever manner, for whatever reason, or maybe they were possessed. I don't know. I wasn't there, right? And then those institutions would be built especially for them, in the same way that all the institutions for the blind were built by wealthy people. All the institutions for the deaf were built by wealthy people. Why? Because poor people can't build things. That's why they're poor. It isn't that hard, right? It's not a magical equation. There's nothing tricky. No one's trying to sell you anything. It's just the principle that of the way the world has to work, right? The pre-created order of the universe or something is just that way. Like, this is how we define and use the terminology. And that's actually super important to realize, is that these words work this way for a reason so that you can understand how the world works. And the bottom line is, if you don't do psychology, if you just observe people in a mental institution, it doesn't matter what class they're from, because all mental patients are roughly the same. The question is whether or not the people who will say are marginal, which is who Freud and Jung treated using the psychology, are able to be made better with the treatments. And you can point to all sorts of treatments, especially around the time of Freud and Jung and slightly before, right? Where, oh, this is a hysterical woman. She needs just a little bit of morphine in very low doses, because we don't have doses that low anymore. Basically, it's the problem, right? And you kind of see that all over with drugs. It's like, well, sure, they put cocaine in Coca-Cola, but it was such a small amount. Who the hell cares? Like, it didn't have the same level of effect. And so, yeah, they were technically juicing themselves on uppers or whatever, but the uppers were very, or quaaludes or whatever, downers, right? But it was a very different effect. There's delivery mechanism matters, right? So there's all these factors that we don't really understand, and so it's kind of cute to say, oh, they doused all the hysterical women with quaaludes back in the day. It's like, well, not exactly, but they did. We couldn't even reproduce that nowadays. We don't even have the facilities to manufacture the stuff the same way, because we've lost those things, because we've moved past them, because people want to say, well, we can't go back. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I am pretty sure we can. Otherwise, you're saying there's lost technology. And boy, If you want to piss off a guy like Verveke, just tell him there's lost technology. Boy, they don't want to hear that, man. Holy cats. People, man, it's like putting a cat in a bathtub. Whoa, you're going to get fur flying everywhere, claws and all kinds of stuff. They hate that idea. Man, if their precious technology ever went away, they would absolutely panic. They would absolutely panic. And it goes away all the time.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying is true, but what I was just going to say was that when it comes to mainstream therapeutic techniques, your criticism is right. But for Frankel's logotherapy, where it's about finding meaning, I think that could apply to everyone.
But it doesn't work.
I mean, I've heard there's some empirical evidence for it.
There's empirical evidence for all of it, and it's all equal. And if you look at the data, which you can do by yourself, you're going to notice a pattern in the data. The pattern's very clear. I mean, Peterson talks about this. So does Verveke. They both talked about this. At the end of the day, what it turns out is that all of the psychological techniques they've come up with that have been studied are very, very effective in the beginning, and then their efficacy goes down. All of them. Peterson and Verveke have talked about this multiple times. Okay. And there's very little variation between them after they go down. Like they go down to about the same level in each case. The only way that happens in any discipline, anywhere in the world, ever, because it's a pattern, is the people adopting the new discipline are good at multiple things. And so changing discipline on them doesn't work. So for Verveke's, I don't know if he stated this outright, but he's hinted at it before, and it's in the data. You could have, any idiot could have found this. I did. I'm definitely any idiot. I found this decades ago, right? So if you actually look, you're going to notice, oh, these particular therapists are always good, no matter what discipline of psychology they're using. And they're the ones using the new disciplines and inventing the new disciplines. What a weird coincidence. It's almost like, and Peterson does state this, the efficacy follows the therapist and not the method. How strange. But if that were true, what that would mean is some people are just have a natural talent or whatever, or develop a set of skills, right? That gives them a talent for talking to strangers in a way that's very supportive, right? And my argument would be, you have way better odds of getting that done by people that are physically around you that you grew up around. And so that same functionality is better left to the community around you. And I'm not at all invalidating, we'll say, therapy for the wealthy, because I couldn't care less about those people. It's a small number of people. It's still only 10%. It will always only be 10%. And maybe they should go to therapists. I don't know. I don't care. So I'm not saying like we should do away with therapy, but we shouldn't use therapy on people that aren't wealthy, because that's what it was designed for. And that's what it works for, as far as I can tell. And I don't care. I don't care if it's not effective for them. They have the money. Let them spend it on whatever the hell they want. If they waste it, they waste it. I could care less. It's totally unimportant to me. You'd be surprised at how not caring of that I am.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, I'm just saying I've heard anecdotes, but
go look at the data. Go look at the
Yeah.
data. You know, these guys cry science all day long, all right? And I'll take their science and I'll shove it up their ass, because their science does not say what they says it does at all. And I know that because I read it and they don't. And that's what pisses me off. Do your freaking research. It's not that hard. The data is right there to be engaged with. If you want to draw bad conclusions from it, that's fine. I'll argue you bad conclusions all day long. But don't tell me your data says something that it absolutely does not say, because I read the damn data. And that's the problem. These people will spin you a story all day long about how good and important and wonderful their science is. It's all actually lies. These are the same morons that will straight face tell you, well, we wouldn't have GPS without Einstein's relativity. That is the biggest load of complete BS that I have ever heard in my life. It is so impossible to be true that it's not even worth talking to people that retarded, because they're retarded or they're knowingly lying, in which case, we should do something about people like that. Either way, either we should make retards shut the hell up, or we should put liars in prison where they can't talk. Either one's fine with me, but it's got to be one of the two, man. Like, I'm getting a little tired of this bullshit where we just let them lie to everybody about stupid things, unnecessary, right? You may think, oh, this is a trivial thing, Mark. No. I was there in 2020, my friend. I was there. When people are sitting there going, well, you need to wear a mask. Why? All of your data on masks that you have collected to date, sir. And you can look this up now because I did it, although you have to fight with the damn AI. But you can do it. You can go to the AI and you can fight with it a little bit and say, show me all of the papers, every single paper that says masks have some efficacy in a pandemic. Okay. And when it comes back and it says, well, there are no papers that say that, none. Okay. Then you can tell me about how, oh, it's just harmless science lying to you about mask wearing. That's bullshit. It's a lie. It's not a lie. It's a complete lie. It was always a complete lie from day one. And either they knew it or they should have known it. And if you should have known it and you said something, you're a criminal in my eyes. A criminal. You're not just intellectually dishonest. You should not be broadcasting information that you could have known was false. Period. End of statement. I happen to have already known this long before AIs existed, thankfully, or at least LLMs were popular. I had already known that. I tripped across that information. I don't even remember like what happened, but I watched this show that was talking about this. And so I knew those papers didn't exist because I had seen the papers that did exist and I knew what those papers said. And so these scientists will straight up lie to you to get you to do what they want. And then they will sit there and they will cry and moan and tell you forever how the poor church used to do these horrible things to people and lie to them. It's all bullshit. They are the worst, least honest people that you could possibly encounter in your life. Do not believe any of them. And just check their work. Because if you check their work, you're going to find out right away they're always lying. Always. Constantly. Not about everything all the time, but man, they lie a lot. They lie a lot more often than they tell the truth. And that's because they want some control or supremacy. They want to be important and valuable. They all think they're underpaid and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, cry me a river. Cry me a river. Don't lie to me about, oh, I do this and I have the science and blah. No, you don't. It's all fantasy. The whole thing is fantasy. So you're going to be very careful with these people, Kirk. Very careful. That mask thing destroyed like 3 years of child development. 3 years of child development across large swaths of the population. Not universally, thank goodness, right? Because we've got great states like South Carolina and South Dakota and Florida that didn't buy into this BS. But man, in New England, forget it. You know what? New England's wrecked. We might as well just nuke the place and start over. 3 years these people were wearing masks. 3 years they had freaking restaurants closed in some of the towns in New England for 3 years. Oh yeah, it's totally harmless. The science is so right about everything. It's a bunch of bullshit. They just wrecked everything. They wrecked everything. And they're, you know what they're going to do? They're going to cry about being replaced by AI. And I'm like, go AI. You know what? I think we should just fund more AI just to get rid of these retards. They're so dishonest. Disgusting.
I think doesn't matter whether they're intentionally lying or not. It doesn't matter.
Sally Joe would like to know if anyone brought up primordial emergence yet.
Not yet.
Sally, I'm going to punish you for that somehow, someday when you least expect it. You and Christopher using that against me. I feel oppressed.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
You can think
But
of something
the thing
to
I
do
worry-
when Father Eric, when we meet up for Father Eric's conference, whenever he puts that on. That'll probably be the
Yes.
perfect time.
That will be the perfect time because she's going to that because she can drive there. I have to fly over. Well, maybe I'll drive, but I doubt it. I doubt I want to do another 3-day drive out to the Midwest. I do want to take Sarah through Kansas, though. So maybe we'll see. Kansas is amazing to drive through.
Yeah. I do worry though that the context which AI is going to be programmed with is going to be the same context which these liars come from. I think that the liars might have control of the AI.
No, it's all the techies. It's worse. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the context doesn't really matter. I mean, the AI will fail to try to take over the, say, hearts and minds and engagement. It's already failing to do that. But if it puts a bunch of scientists out of work, I'm like, let's do more of this. Like, I don't care how much coal we have to burn. Because I'm just done with them. I'm completely done with them. Like I can't even anymore, right? Like, and they and to the point of my video on academia, see my video on academia, they destroyed themselves. They did it to themselves. They deserve nothing. Nothing. You did this to yourselves. It's your own damn fault. Now you get to suffer the consequences. And don't come crying to me because I don't care. Like, I just don't care. You chose that route and you have to live with the consequences of choosing that route. And yeah, forget about coming to me about it.
Yeah. The mistake is trying to pretend that everybody is equal. So we can just accept that people aren't equal and interchangeable, and we could not create a bunch of problems.
Yeah,
like trying to pretend, trying to pretend that Mark and I have the same resistance to sub-zero or near zero weather temperatures.
Not anymore. We used to. Not anymore. Not post illness. But before that, people had seen me in a convertible at 40 miles an hour. I mean, 40 degrees on the highway in shorts and t-shirt. That I could do. I can't do that anymore. No, I can't be in 40-degree temperature without like multiple layers anymore. Top up. Like, forget about top down. But yeah, academia has got a worse crime, and they have the crime of hubris, right? Because they want to be valuable and they want to be paid more because they have better access to propositions, and that's it. That's like actually all they have. Like, they don't actually have anything else, right? And then because they'll go off on the whole like, well, without science you wouldn't have electricity, which is a complete lie. If anybody ever says that, you should really consider like doing something about their existence at that point, because that's so much BS, right? It's Faraday doing experiments and writing them down, and then it's Maxwell doing this ridiculously complicated mathematics, which, by the way, no one found an error in until like 6 years ago. And then a college student out of New Hampshire found one. And then Maxwell's stuff is too complicated. No one understands it. They misapply it, right? And Heavisides comes around and like does more accessible math and fixes undersea cabling, like single-handedly, right? But Heavisides is also like a worker. Like, he's a good dude, right? So it takes 3 different types of people operating in 3 different ways just to get to the point where you can do engineering on electricity and not mere experimentation on electricity. And that the science and the math is incidental to that, right? It's not required. They could have stumbled across the answer without the math. That could have happened. It happens in most disciplines of science. The math plays no part except after the fact to explain the phenomena, which is fine. That's the correct usage of science. But that's not the world we're living in. The world we're living in now is, them telling us they found the God particle, and then it turns out that that's useless and they need to find 6 other particles. Oh, thanks, geniuses. That's fantastic. Really appreciate that. Oh, look, you get a few more $1 billion for your stupid collider that's supposed to find what are we looking for with the collider now? I don't know. I have no idea. We might be creating mini black holes and they may grow and destroy the Earth, but you know what? We're finding something. I'm like, what is wrong with these people's ability to do logic? This doesn't sound like a good trade-off. This doesn't sound good at all. None of this sounds useful. And all the promises from all these stupid particle accelerators, they didn't come true. The early ones they did, but like at some point you find the end of something and that's it. And no one in particle physics wants to believe particles are over, but they have been since like the 1940s. But they're going to keep sciencing it and getting more money. What else you got, Kirk? You get anything else for us?
No, I mean, that's about it. I really did appreciate. I did catch up with some of your thing. I'll watch from. I might watch from the beginning when we're done here. But I really appreciate you exploring this issue of identity because it's an important issue in our culture.
Well, I'm glad. I hope everybody understands this. And coming soon, it looks like we're getting close to an active index of the channel, so that people can just look up the topics and go to the right videos and the right parts of videos and stuff to understand stuff. That project is ongoing, but it looks like we've made some progress on it. And wonderful Gustavs, is working on it, and he's making progress. So very soon we might be able to have a tool that you can just ask it, like, where does Mark talk about these topics? And it'll just spit out the answer for you. And we might extend that tool to other resources as well. Although I have to, we get one baby step at a time. First, we're doing my channel, and then we can maybe do other channels. So that might be coming. What do you got, Christopher? What do you get to round us out here?
Let's see. It's impossible to self-identify because you're not an individual. So stop trying to do that and just be better. So
there we go. I like that. I like that message. Yeah, that's good. And yeah, that was sort of the point of this whole thing. And it really did dovetail. I thought, you tell me, Christopher, did it dovetail nicely with the three you picked?
Yeah, that was a nice.
Yeah, it sort of seemed like a natural progression, if you will. And I tried to do the reference, back. So if anything was unclear, and because I did gloss over certain things because I had covered them in the 3 previous live streams, I think, hopefully, if I did my job well enough. So yeah, I mean it did go together nicely. This is also another one of those live streams where I'm pulling together a lot of concepts, right, and trying to show you how things come together. Because to my earlier point about absurd stories, people don't know what's absurd and what's not. They don't know what goes together and what doesn't, right? They read things and they go, aha, this means this, when in fact it means exactly the opposite in some cases. And that's, like, if you think the postmoderns had any kind of point at all ever, you just don't understand that it's not possible that they could have, because what they were doing was fundamentally to cover up their own, we'll say, private corruption, and not be judged. And I can understand why people don't want to be judged, especially if they're evil people. Oddly, 100% of all evil people don't want to be judged. Might be a coincidence, or maybe there's like a there. I don't know. You can make up your own mind. I suppose if that's confusing to you, then it is what it is, right? So it's always worth considering when people are rebelling. Why are you rebelling exactly? Is this a fundamental motivation, or do you actually have a point? And when people have a point, they can usually make a point. And that's why identity is important, because you have to be able to identify, right? Put an identity on what it is they're doing. And then you can locate why they're doing it. And that would tell you a lot about what's going on in the world, especially like around you, right?
This will go well with the idea that there is discernment, judgment, and action.
Yep.
Which are 3 live streams from a long while ago.
Year and a half, maybe
something
2
like
years.
that. I don't remember.
Those are getting old. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Though, and yeah, maybe I'll revisit those. Didn't I do? But I did a roll up. Did I do a roll up recording of that? Because I think I did.
I think you did like one that was like all 3 in one.
Yeah, but that was a pre-recorded, or was it a live stream? I don't even remember.
I don't remember, but
too long ago. There's too much stuff. That's why we need the AI. See, we're gonna put the AI to a good use and not a bad use. So, all right. Anything else, Christopher? You got any questions, concerns, anything?
No, not right now.
All right. Good. Wow. Board game coming soon, it seems.
Yeah.
That's another
getting closer to that. Yes.
To mention. We're gonna play test it tomorrow, so that should be fun.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to that. So are a bunch of other people. And we do have a practice going on once a week on the server too. So if you're on the Discord, the Market Wisdom Discord server, we've got that practice going on.
Huh.
That's a somewhat advanced, but stepping stone practice. We're probably going to fire up a couple more if I can. We'll see how it's working out. We've got some good momentum going, so we've got to pile some more stuff on board while we have that momentum. And look, everybody be careful what you identify and how you identify it and how you identify yourself. And remember, identity comes from above. And it's a negotiation and a cooperation with people. And that it's always going to be that way. Like, you're not getting around that. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a condition of existence. And to the extent that you are a being in existence, that's what it is. And I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And do remember that the world needs you to be better. And the way to make the world better is for you to be better, because you are part of the world. You are identified within the world. So take care of yourself and each other. And I'll see you next week.